The smell of fresh coffee trailed behind me as I walked into the dining room, the mug warm between my palms. Jared had texted me 10 minutes earlier. Family meeting. Downstairs. No explanation. No greeting. I thought maybe it was about the new fence he'd been talking about, or maybe the car repairs. I even smiled to myself, imagining him finally asking for my advice, like he used to when he was 12. But when I stepped into the room, something was off. Jared sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. His wife Lila was perched beside him, manicured fingers tapping her phone like she had better places to be. I pulled out a chair, slowly set the coffee down, and waited. "We need $3,000, Jared said flatly. "By next Friday." I blinked. "For what?" He didn't answer right away. Lila did. Credit card stuff. Medical bills, just things. I looked at my son. "Why are you telling me this like it's a bill I'm already expected to pay?" "Because it is," he said. "You live here. You eat our food. You stay rent-free." My hands tightened around the coffee mug. My house, my mortgage, my name on every paper. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Lila leaned in, her voice sweet and sharp. "If she can't help, maybe she shouldn't be here." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a request. It was a line in the sand. A decision already made. I stared at them, my son, and the woman he chose. The room suddenly felt colder, smaller. I remembered nights holding Jared's hand through fevers, saving every spare dollar to get him through college co-signing loans I never questioned. And now I was being asked to pay rent in the home I built. I stood up without a word, picked up my coffee, and walked back upstairs. By the time I reached the landing, I already knew what I needed to do next. I sat on the edge of my bed, the mug of coffee now lukewarm, untouched. My fingers tapped softly against my thigh. I wasn't angry, not the kind that burns loud. No, this was something deeper. Something still, like the silence just before a storm. I hadn't kept a ledger, but my memory had its own accounting system. Jared's first car? A used Civic I paid in full after his second rejection for financing. His college tuition every semester covered by the extra shifts I picked up at the hospice. And the honeymoon to Belize. That was my wedding gift. They posted sunset photos while I soaked my feet at home after back-to-back 12-hour shifts. I never asked for anything back. Not once. And now, somehow, I owed them. I stood, walked to the closet, and reached up to the shelf where an old hat box sat, dusty but familiar. Inside was a small key taped to the lid. I crossed the room to my dresser, knelt and opened the bottom drawer. Behind my folded sweaters was the fireproof lockbox I hadn't touched in years. The key clicked, and the lid creaked open. Inside, a manila envelope. I pulled it out and laid everything on the bed title to the house updated insurance papers, the original mortgage release. And beneath those, a folder marked J+M account, the joint checking I'd opened to help out with household expenses when Jared lost his job 2 years ago. My name was primary. Every transfer, every autopay, every overdraft, they all passed through me. They thought I wasn't watching, that I was just some old woman lucky to have a place to stay. But the truth was written in every page I'd kept. Jared didn't own this home. He didn't even pay the property tax. I did. Every inch of this house, the roof above them, the floor beneath them, was mine. I closed the box, locked it again, and stood slowly, already thinking 3 steps ahead. They wanted a family meeting. So did I. I used to think giving was love, that if I just gave enough time, money, patience, they'd see me, appreciate me, need me. Jared always needed help. That was the rhythm of our relationship. First it was for books in college, then for the down payment on their first apartment. Then when Lila wanted new kitchen cabinets before the baby came, though the baby never did. I always said yes. Quietly, automatically. I remembered one evening a few years back, standing in their new kitchen, while Lila opened a bottle of imported wine. She had laughed, flipping her hair over one shoulder and saying, "Your mom's basically your bank." Jared had chuckled, pouring 2 glasses. I laughed too, but something in me shifted. I didn't say anything. I never did. That was the problem. For every yes I gave them, I said no to myself. I skipped my own birthday dinners to cover their bills. I worked weekends while they posted photos from wineries. When I canceled a trip to Oregon with my friend Karen because Jared needed help with unexpected car repairs, he didn't even ask if I'd rebooked. I never did. And somehow, in all the giving, I became invisible, useful, not valuable, expected, not appreciated. Even when they moved back into this house just until we get on our feet, I welcomed them. Cleared the guest room, bought new towels. I made space emotionally, financially, physically. But they'd mistaken my kindness for debt. As if I owed them this life I built from scratch. I stared at the ceiling that night, replaying the conversations. Lila's sharp jokes. Jared's silence. My own complicity. I let it happen. I nodded along. I wrote the checks. But love isn't supposed to feel like a transaction. And the moment he said, "Pay or get out," something broke open in me. Not just anger, something older, something colder. A decision was forming. And I wasn't going to laugh this time. I didn't sleep. Not even a little. By 4 a.m., the house was silent. That special kind of quiet that only comes when everyone else is too sure of themselves to think anything might change. The hallway light barely reached the kitchen, but I didn't need much. I moved slowly, deliberately, like every step had already happened in my head 100 times. I sat down at the table, opened my laptop, and started with the joint account. The cursor hovered over close account for a few seconds. Then I clicked. The screen blinked. Done. Next, I opened the insurance portal and removed Jared's car from the policy. He never noticed the coverage was under my name. Never asked who paid the premiums. Never thought to say thank you. Then I pulled out the file Ellen had helped me set up last year after my health scare. Jared's name had been listed on my power of attorney documents. Back then, I thought it was wise. He was my only child. Who else would I trust? I revoked every authorization. Every safety net they thought they had, I pulled it out from under them. It took less than an hour. Years of entanglement gone with a few clicks and digital signatures. No confrontation, no shouting match. Just silence and the slow, careful undoing of everything they took for granted. The coffee I'd brewed sat untouched on the counter, growing cold. I didn't need caffeine. I needed clarity. At 6:42 a.m., I heard footsteps overhead. At 6:59, the front door opened and slammed shut. At 7:03, Jared called. "Mom, he barked my car's gone." I said nothing. He kept going, voice rising. "My card's not working. What the hell is going on?" I looked at the screen as it lit up with his number. Then I turned the phone face down. The quiet I'd always given them, I was finally using it for myself. The pounding hard enough to rattle the picture frames in the hallway. Jared's fists against my door. His voice somewhere between a demand and a plea. "Open up, Mom." "What did you do?" Lila's voice floated up from downstairs, sharp and high-pitched. "She's lost it, Jared. Make her fix it." I slipped on my sweater and walked down the hall, my feet steady on the wood floors. They thought belonged to them. Through the narrow window beside the front door, I saw the sheriff's cruiser pull into the driveway, its lights off the morning sky just beginning to pale behind it. My hands didn't shake as I turned the lock. The door swung open, and there he was. Jared, wild-eyed hair sticking up, phone in one hand, a folded paper from the bank in the other. Behind him, Lila stood on the porch, in her robe, arms crossed tight, like she was the one being wronged. "Mom, the car, the cards, the bills. What's happening?" His words tumbled out, but I stepped aside to make room for the man on the porch. The sheriff nodded politely, held out an envelope and asked for Jared's signature. Jared glanced at me, confused, but took it anyway. His eyes flicked across the first line. "What is this?" His voice cracked. 30-day notice to vacate, the sheriff said calmly. "Owner's request." Jared's face drained of color. "Owner, this is my house." I met his gaze, the same green eyes he'd had as a child. "No, Jared," I said softly. "It never was." He looked down at the paper again, as if the ink might rearrange itself into a different answer. Lila's mouth opened, but nothing came out. For once, there were no demands, no jokes about me being a bank. Just the sound of the sheriff's boots retreating down the steps and the creak of the screen door closing behind him. After the sheriff left, the house fell into an uneasy silence. Jared and Lila retreated to the guest room, whispering behind a closed door. I climbed the stairs slowly, my hand gliding over the railing Thomas had built when Jared was still in grade school. The wood felt smooth, familiar, like an old friend. In my closet, behind a row of winter coats, sat a cedar-colored box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were letters Thomas had written me over decades. Birthday notes, anniversary cards, small scraps of encouragement slipped into my purse during long shifts at the hospital. They smelled faintly of ink and old paper, like a time when love meant something simple. I sifted through them until one caught my eye. The envelope was worn at the edges, folded so many times it had become soft as fabric. His handwriting was still strong even at the end. "You were always the backbone. Don't let them forget that." My breath caught as I read it again. The ache of his absence sitting heavy on my chest. He'd known even then what I would be up against. I sat on the edge of the bed with the letter in my lap, the morning light filtering through the blinds. Downstairs, a door slammed, followed by the muted sound of Jared's voice, still trying to make sense of what he'd been handed. I thought of the little boy who once clung to my leg, afraid of thunderstorms, and how easily he had grown into a man who could demand my money without looking me in the eye. I pulled a note card from my nightstand, uncapped a pen, and wrote slowly the words steady and sure. This house was built on love. You tried to replace it with leverage. Folding it neatly, I walked to the hallway and slid it under Jared's door without knocking. The next morning, I drove straight to the bank. The manager recognized me. I'd opened the joint account years ago thinking it was a lifeline for them. I signed the request form and waited quietly as she pulled the transaction records. I had brought the folder from home, the one filled with documents Thomas and I had kept meticulously over the years. Birth certificates, insurance policies, the house deed, all of it in my name. But none of that prepared me for the spreadsheet the manager handed me. 4 years. $87,216. I stared at the numbers, each one screaming in silence. Transactions labeled urgent withdrawal or home maintenance disguised what they really were. I traced the trail $3,600 to a luxury resort in Sedona. $1,900 to a designer boutique in Dallas. Thousands on spa packages, high-end electronics, even a prom planner twice. All of it under the guise of emergencies. All of it pulled from the account I'd topped up every month without question. I'd been working double shifts, eating leftovers, skipping vacations for what? So they could live like nothing ever needed sacrifice. The final straw came in a line marked Event Catering. $2,400. The same week, Jared had told me they were barely covering groceries. I remembered making them soup that week. I remembered watching Lila eat it like it was charity. I asked the manager to freeze the account completely. No more partial access. No more calls from Jared pretending to be locked out of online banking. When I left, I didn't feel relief. I felt emptied out. Like they'd carved me into someone who existed only to fund their show. But I wasn't an ATM. I wasn't a silent sponsor. I drove home with the folder on the seat beside me and a new file in my purse. The transaction history that turned love into debt. I didn't cry when I got home. Instead, I opened my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and began blocking one by one. Jared, Lila, the joint group chat titled Family Updates. Gone. I deleted the shared calendar that used to ping me reminders, like Jared's dentist, Lila's birthday dinner. Rent due cover if short. I had covered every shortfall for years. Now there would be no more reminders, no more alerts, just quiet. The first text came an hour later, from an unknown number. You ruined everything. What's wrong with you? Then another. We needed that money. You always said you'd help. And then, you're sick, after everything we've done for you. I didn't reply. I turned off my phone entirely and walked outside. The garden was still there, untouched by any of it. The autumn air was cool and the soil soft from last night's rain. I knelt where Thomas's bench used to sit. Years ago, he'd stained the wood himself, humming while I planted rosemary nearby. He always said the smell made him feel grounded. The bench had rotted through last spring, and I'd never replaced it. Too busy. Too many bills. I dug with my hands, turning the soil over gently, slowly, carefully. It felt good to do something quiet. Something mine. I took the young vine I'd bought the week before and placed it in the hole, pressing earth around its roots. A new vine. A new beginning. Behind me, my phone buzzed on the porch again and again. I didn't move. Let it ring. Let it scream. For once, I wouldn't be the one explaining, apologizing, rescuing. For once, I was choosing quiet over chaos. I watered the vine and sat on the porch, watching the sky shift into a deeper gray, the kind of color that warned of rain, but not quite yet. It was a cousin from Oregon who told me. I hadn't spoken to Melinda in years, distant on the tree but sharp with updates. Her message came through email, plain and short. Thought you should know. Lila left Jared. He's in a bad spot. I didn't feel much at first. No relief, no victory. Just a hollow, quiet space where the old ache used to live. Melinda went on. They were selling furniture online, trying to scrape enough together to make rent. Jared had applied for credit at 2 places. Both denied. One flagged the shared car lease he hadn't updated after I revoked insurance. Another cited the joint account history closed with debt and missed payments. He was drowning. Not because I pushed, but because I stopped being the life raft. I made a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the last envelope. Inside was the final deed transfer form still unsigned. I'd delayed it not out of hesitation, but out of ceremony. It had been symbolic waiting for them to understand, to apologize, to become people I could trust again. But some storms don't come with thunder. Some end in silence. I signed the papers, slowly sealing them in the return envelope addressed to the county clerk's office. It was all typed out neatly. No gaps, no ambiguity. The house was mine again. Legally. Finally. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I folded the envelope, stood, and walked it out to the mailbox. The sky was a dull gray, heavy, but still. I stood there a moment longer, letting the quiet settle in my chest, like a weight I'd learned to carry. Inside the kitchen still smelled like ground beans and damp earth from yesterday's planting. I returned to the sink, rinsed my mug, and placed it down beside a note I'd scribbled weeks ago, one I hadn't dared to reread until now. It only had 4 words. You don't own me. That evening, I lit a candle beside it. Not for anyone else. Just for me. The envelope came on a Tuesday. No return address, just my name written in Jared's blocky, unmistakable handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the entry table while I cleaned the kitchen, refilled the bird feeder, and folded laundry that didn't need folding. It wasn't fear holding me back. It was readiness. I needed to be still before I let his words in. When I finally opened it, the paper was thick and slightly smudged. His handwriting had always been heavy, like he pressed too hard, trying to make things last longer than they should. There was no greeting. No Dear Mom. Just a sentence scratched in black ink. I didn't know how much I was taking until it was gone. Nothing else. No requests. No blame. No second chance disguised as guilt. Just a sentence that landed with the weight of all the years we lost. I read it twice. Then again, and I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just felt the truth in it. He hadn't known. Maybe he still didn't fully understand, but it didn't matter anymore. The absence of expectation was louder than any apology he could have written. And maybe that was the closest thing to understanding he'd ever be capable of. I folded the letter gently, not out of sentiment, but out of respect for what it represented. A receipt, not a reconciliation. Upstairs, I pulled down the box from the closet shelf, the one that held my husband's letter, still faint with time, and the scent of paper that had carried me through darker seasons. I slipped Jared's note beside it, not above, not below, just beside. Then I went to the kitchen and made a fresh pot of coffee. The sun had started to creep across the floorboards, catching on the edges of the ceramic mug. I took it in both hands, letting the warmth settle into my palms. No noise, no pleading, just quiet, and the sound of something finally closing.